Every type of power system explained, including number 6, a category I've never seen anyone discuss before. Number 1, wild is the first type of power system. Wild systems operate under what is called soft magic, meaning the rules about what can and cannot happen are barely defined, if they're defined at all. In a world with soft magic, a wizard can cast a spell to create a fireball, or turn you into a frog, or do any other thing the author can think up, with no limits or rules to follow. Characters' powers might appear at random, change between installments, or just serve the purpose of specific scenarios. In the Mario video games, there's no rational explanation for superstars or fire flowers. They exist so we get to have more fun playing as Mario. They don't say anything about the grander world or Mario himself. In a wild power system, there is no overarching logic binding together the fantasy of the world. And when I say fantasy or magic, I don't mean that literally. Science fiction worlds where the powers are based on technology can absolutely have a wild system too. Rick and Morty is a good example. Rick's science can do basically anything he wants it to, regardless of whether or not it's based in any real-world technological process. Now, hearing this, you might think that wild systems are just bad or lazy, but that's not necessarily the case at all. A lot of stories with wild power systems are great as long as they account for it correctly. If the power system exists primarily to serve the tone of the world, the spectacle of the battles, or the identity of the characters, then it's absolutely acting as a positive force for the story. The emphasis doesn't need to be placed on the mechanics of the powers for the system or the greater story to be good. Let me give you some examples. In Adventure Time, the Land of Ooo absolutely has a wild power system. There are all types of bonkers, magic, gods, demons, technology, monsters, and none of it has any explanation. There are vague structures. We learn that there are 4 elements in the world: ice, fire, candy, and slime, but why these are the elements or how they interact with each other is never the point of the stories being told. Or what about Sonic the Hedgehog? These games take place in a world where the main characters all have unique superpowers with no explanation why. Sonic is super fast, Knuckles is super strong, Tails can fly, but why they're like that doesn't matter. We just want to play as them and do cool stuff. The Chaos Emeralds are pure soft magic. We don't know what they are or why they work the way they do. They can basically grant wishes just because. But that's because the power system isn't the focus of the world. In a wild system, power is allowed to be strange, flexible, or unexplained because the story is about something else. The mechanics are not meant to be interrogated because they're not the focus. The only real stipulations required for a wild power system to be good are these. Is it cool, and is it consistent? The first is self-explanatory, so I'll focus on the second one. The abilities in a wild system need to be fairly consistent. We don't need to know why Sonic is fast or exactly how fast he is, as long as he's generally the fastest guy around in every story. Mario's mushrooms don't need a backstory, but they do need to make him bigger and stronger every time he eats one. Without consistency in your power system, your story basically devolves into the babblings of a kindergartner. Batman grew 1,000,000 feet tall and blew up the sun. Then he turned his hands into ice cream and did a backflip over Jupiter. It's just nonsense. The second type of power system is definitive. Basically, the opposite of wild, these systems use hard magic. There is a structured set of rules that explains the basic premise behind the fantasy elements of this world. Just like a wild system, this is a really broad net. Any power system that has any amount of explanation is technically definitive, and they spread across a broad spectrum from simple to complex. Here, power is governed by identifiable rules that are consistent, shared, and understood within the world. The audience is encouraged to ask questions and make predictions based on their knowledge of how the power system works. Where does this come from? What are the limits? What if this rule is broken? Those are the thoughts that the author is trying to spark in the viewer's mind to get them engaged with the story, because that is the primary benefit of a definitive system. It engages your brain. When we understand the basics of chakra control, it becomes interesting to watch Naruto train his Rasengan and create the Rasen Shuriken. If we didn't know that chakra had natures like wind and fire, or that the Rasengan is an exceedingly difficult jutsu because of the concentrated energy and spinning force, watching an arc where he learns the Rasen Shuriken becomes immediately boring. It's just a guy trying and failing over and over again to do a cool thing. The context is what gets us to care. My Hero Academia is the same. The power system of quirks is definitive. Both the characters and the audience understand basic rules of the world. Most people are born with quirks. They are a fundamental part of your identity. Training a quirk can make it stronger, and hypothetically having multiple quirks makes you really, really powerful. So when we're introduced to All for One, a villain who can take away people's quirks and use them for himself, it immediately clicks in our minds how powerful, dangerous, and scary he is. No one needs to gas him up for him to be a threatening villain. Our knowledge of the power system informs our opinions on the character and leads us to speculate. How many quirks do you think he has? Are there any he can't steal? Could he ever take too many? To use an example from a Western story, Harry Potter is absolutely a definitive power system. While the rules can be a little loose in places, they're generally fairly rigid. Magic is nearly impossible to do without a wand. You need to understand the spell that you're casting and pronounce it correctly. The speed at which you can cast a spell and react to others directly influences your skill in duels, and all of this is boosted even further if you're creative and can think on your feet. Harry's entire dueling philosophy, which lets him save the world, is based on the first rule. You need a wand to cast spells. So he just gets really, really good at the one spell that makes other people drop their wands. This is a clever cheese strategy based on the rules of the world, and it endears us to his character. The defining philosophy of a definitive power system is this: power is meaningful because it is constrained. Abilities come with costs, limits, and drawbacks. One of the most basic definitive systems is Ki from Dragon Ball, a natural energy you cultivate through training, with various applications like flight, extrasensory perception, enhanced strength, energy blasts, but the fundamentals are simple. Everyone has a finite amount of Ki. You use it up the more you fight, and you can get more by increasing your life force, usually through training. But once we understand these simple rules, it opens up the possibilities into some really exciting stuff. Transformations. The idea that by undergoing a physical change, you can rapidly increase your life energy, meaning more Ki, meaning you get much stronger. Or fusions. Joining the Ki of two beings makes a new being with drastically more power. And of course, there are drawbacks too. The Kaioken was an early way for Goku to boost his Ki for a short while, but it had a drawback. He was left weak and in debilitating pain right afterwards. So when he decided to ignore King Kai's advice and push the ability far beyond its safe limits, it was insanely dramatic. We knew the costs would be potentially deadly. As simple as Ki is, understanding it is fundamental to getting why Cell is a bigger threat than Frieza, why characters make drastic life-threatening choices, and why Gohan's hair changing ever so slightly is actually a really big deal. Everyone looks back on these transformations with nostalgia because they were so hype and exciting, but they wouldn't have been if we didn't have the context for why they mattered. Moving on, each of the following types of power systems are all definitive, with an additional qualifier, meaning they follow rules that we can understand, and they also have other unique attributes. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Our third type of power system is thematic. In a thematic system, the power not only follows rules, but its execution by the characters directly ties into the grander ideas or messages of the narrative. Here, power reflects who you are, what you believe, or what the story is trying to say. A good litmus test to see if a power system is thematic is to try explaining it to someone without mentioning any theme or moral of the story. I think the best example I can give to introduce the concept is Star Wars. In this universe, there is the Force, an energy field that exists in all places and within all beings and objects, connecting everything together in a giant, supernatural, invisible web. Characters can use the Force to strengthen themselves and manipulate matter around themselves. And if I stopped right there, this might be a regular old definitive system, but there is a lot of additional context needed. In Star Wars, you can interact with the Force primarily in two ways: by submitting to its will, moving along with it, and using its power for the greater balance of the galaxy, the light side used by the Jedi, or you can bend it to your will, indulging your negative emotions to draw strength and destructive power, the dark side of the Sith. The way the characters engage with the power system is fundamentally linked to their thoughts, emotions, wills, and morality. Luke Skywalker learning to let go and trust in something greater than himself, have patience and dedicate himself to improvement, and finally choose love and forgiveness over hatred and revenge. These aren't just the morals of his movies. Each lesson makes makes him a better and more powerful Jedi. And in contrast, if we look at the sequel trilogy, the thematic elements of the power system are forgotten or completely misinterpreted. Rey's lesson across all three films is that she's awesome and doesn't need to change anything about herself, a fundamental betrayal of the themes that were integral to the power system in the original trilogy. So when she gets a giant power-up at the end and says, "I am all the Jedi," the audience feels nothing. Why is she all the Jedi? How did we get to this point? The Force has devolved into a wild power system now, just doing whatever services the plot, no longer tied to the rules that the audience can understand, or themes that define the characters. Another great example is from Avatar: The Last Airbender. In the original series, bending was a deeply spiritual practice based on Eastern martial arts. We saw that people learned bending by studying nature, earthbending from the badger moles, waterbending from the moon and the tides, and the more wise and enlightened a character was, the more powerful a bender they were in tandem. Yes, there were villains who betrayed the natural order of the world and were exceedingly powerful, but they could never reach the heights of a grandmaster in tune with nature and the spirits. It's why we understood even a blind 11-year-old girl, Toph, could defeat gigantic muscle men with decades of earthbending experience because she understood the badger moles on a far better level than anyone else on the planet. We totally accept that 4 old guys can take back Ba Sing Se on their own because the White Lotus is filled with the wisest characters from the entire story. It was clear that the power of characters was defined by both the rules of the world and the themes of the story. The best example, however, is probably Gurren Lagann. Spiral power is human willpower. The primary message of the series, that the human will can break any barrier and push past any limit, is the exact metaphysical power that Simone and the Team Dai Gurren used to overthrow their multiversal overlords and save all of causality. And it's sick as hell because it riles up that emotion, that theme within our hearts. I can do anything if I keep trying. And that's the primary benefit of a thematic power system. By using symbolism to directly tie philosophy to the magic of the world, we're more likely as viewers to understand and appreciate the message, as well as feel more connected to the characters as they learn the same lesson. I love watching Goku get stronger over the course of Dragon Ball, but I relate so much more to Aang as he grew up and mastered the 4 elements, because I joined him on that journey of maturing and learning a deeper appreciation of the world and its beauty. The 4th type of power system is pluralistic. This is a definitive system in which multiple other systems exist. Essentially, it's a world where there are several unique and separate power systems that exist on their own, but can interact with one another. The important distinction here is that each power system has its own rules, history, origins, and limitations, but they share a single continuity. A great example is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. When you first sit down to watch JoJo, even in part 1, we're introduced to multiple power systems. The stone masks and vampires have their own rules and limitations, and the breathing art of Hamon is a separate power system devised by ancient man to combat these vampiric forces. Even though they're immediately at odds, the 2 power systems can exist without interacting. Jonathan beats a vampiric Dio the first time by dropping a burning house on him. He didn't even know what Hamon was yet. And as the series continues, we get even more power systems within the same world. Stands are introduced in part 3, psychic ghosts that each behave according to their own unique rules. Stands really skirt the line closer to a wild system with just how much they can vary, but they do have guidelines that the characters and we viewers can comprehend and follow along with. And when Jotaro battles Dio, he's forced to contend with both the most powerful stand of the world and Dio's vampiric abilities, meaning attacks that would defeat other villains have no effect due to his near limitless healing factor. Watching these different power systems play off one another in the same world is exciting and cool. It's practically half the fun of Western superhero comics. In Marvel or DC, you have gigantic worlds that basically have to adhere to a pluralistic power system because they contain so many supernatural characters. For example, Superman. His biology as an alien, a Kryptonian, is a power system. We understand the rules rules that by absorbing the light of a yellow sun, he gains incredible powers. The more sunlight he gets, the stronger and faster he gets. If you swap it out with red sun radiation, he loses his powers. And if he comes into contact with kryptonite, he loses those powers and experiences incredible pain. With this power system, we can generally predict how he'll react to any given situation. And when Supergirl shows up, his cousin, we immediately understand how her powers work as well, because she uses the same power system. But Superman isn't the only hero in DC. You also have the Flash, who taps into an extra-dimensional energy known as the Speed Force, the source of all movement through the entire multiverse. By harnessing it, he can move faster than light, travel through time, and even sap the speed and momentum of other characters. The Speed Force is its own power system too, one that other speedsters use. So, if Superman and the Flash are at odds for some reason, we instantly start asking ourselves, how do these two power systems interact? Superman can move faster than light too by absorbing yellow sunlight. So if Flash tried to steal his speed to freeze him in place, is there an amount of sunlight Superman could absorb to overwhelm the speed steal ability? In a snap, I am so incredibly engaged in the story because I'm asking questions about the way the world functions in a pluralistic power system. Thor's hammer is magically enchanted to only be lifted by those worthy of it, but Magneto can control and manipulate metal. Could his powers lift the hammer? Can Hamon be used to damage stands? Can Wonder Woman's lasso of truth overpower the will of a Green Lantern? And speaking of Green Lanterns, an important thing to note is that the multiple power systems within a pluralistic system can be any type. Green Lantern rings function a specific way, powered by a specific creature that harnesses willpower, and that system can interact with other systems like the Red or Blue Lanterns, each of which have slightly different abilities and rules. You can group all the lanterns into one pluralistic power system, which is itself one of many in the grander DC pluralistic power system, alongside the Speed Force, Kryptonians, Martians, Atlanteans, etc. And the Lantern Cores are also thematic systems, as the user of a ring has their power as a lantern directly tied to a given emotion, along with their ability to understand and regulate it. Can you tell I think Green Lanterns are really cool? Just this one little piece of the grander DC universe is so complex, which is why there are so many ideas and questions we can have when considering them as part of that greater whole. In a pluralistic system, different sources of power answer to different laws, solve different problems, and produce different kinds of conflict. Because each system is internally coherent, it allows us to ask greater questions. Magic versus technology, faith versus science, willpower versus biology, fate versus free will, or a free-for-all of far more than just forces or ideology. And of course, then you have a world like Bleach, where the multiple power systems overlap as the protagonist learns to use them in tandem with one another, creating a greater sense of hype. The fifth and final traditional power system is synergistic, a definitive power system that has multiple sets of rules with strict internal consistency and high levels of complexity. I said before that any definitive system exists on a spectrum of complexity. A synergistic system is when you push the limits all the way to the right, creating a very rigidly mechanical construction that guides the world. Essentially, it treats the fictional power system as more of a science than magic. All or most of the questions a viewer might have about the functions of the power are explained. Details that would normally be hand-waved away are given a thorough examination to create an intellectual rigor that's pretty unique in fiction, but can be very refreshing if that's your sort of thing. And the various sets of rules introduced all interact with one another in an expected way. The mystery is not in how it all works. In a synergistic system, there is a closed logic loop. Edge cases are explainable, they're not hand-waved away. To return to a previous example, Naruto's system of chakra has some rigid definitions and rules. Particular chakra natures are strong and weak against each other. They have combined nature transformations when you mix them. Wind and water chakra creates ice release, for example. But a lot of this overlap is kind of vaguely stuffed into the catch-all of Kekkei Genkai, or bloodline jutsu. They allow for all sorts of magic that doesn't fit into the nature release model. For example, we don't know what happens if you mix fire and lightning release, or the hand signs used to summon jutsu, how they work, or which ones are connected to to a particular jutsu is never given any explanation. For that reason, chakra doesn't qualify as a synergistic system. Of course, the best example, and the one I'm sure many of you have already typed up in a comment about, is Nen from Hunter x Hunter. Nen is often hailed as the pinnacle of power systems in anime because of how detailed and internally consistent it is, while maintaining such an air of simplicity. It all begins with 5 basic core principles: aura quantity, aura control, Nen categories, conditions and limitations, and intent and risk. All of these 5 principles are fairly easy to understand in a vacuum, and when they are all applied throughout the story, they make up every subsequent ability that characters show and the logic of this system. Essentially, they turn it into a math equation where we can fairly reliably predict how a character's power will change based on the variables. Applying a restriction increases an ability's strength. Narrowing the conditions make it more effective. Adding personal risk makes the power more reliable. And every hunter's Nen type tells us exactly which abilities they're predetermined to be better or worse at using. The show even goes out of its way to answer questions about this early. Spending your time training up a Nen type that you're not efficient in is likely to get you killed. And even the heavy hitters, who in most manga and anime would be special exceptions to the rules of the power system, still exist comfortably within Nen's constraints. Chrollo is busted, but he has pretty heavy constraints on his power. Gon can become the strongest character in the series, but he must pay the cost of his condition to achieve it. The same can be said for Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, a series of fantasy novels set on alien planet Roshar, where the protagonists use the power of Surge Bind, absorbing the power of Stormlight to fuel their different types of spells, of which there are 10. Surge Binding is only possible by fusing with a Spren, mystical spirits that embody concepts like honor and truth. And if it sounds like I'm just spitting gibberish, that's only the beginning. There are multiple other smaller magic systems present. The Stormlight Archives are a pluralistic world, but everything is mechanically explained and understood by the characters. Much like Nen, to use Surge Binding, you need to have proper understanding of the essentials, access to Stormlight, a bond with a Spren. You need to speak the proper ideals with the corresponding intent. There are a lot of very specific rules at play. That is a synergistic system. In these types of worlds, new powers are rarely a surprise. They're simply clever applications of the specific rules already outlined. And because of that, battles are more like puzzles than clashing power levels. Watching them unfold is sort of like watching a chess match. You need to know how each piece acts in order to follow along, but if you do, it can be really riveting to watch 2 masters match wits. The important thing to remember is that a synergistic system isn't just really complex, it needs multiple sets of defined rules that interact with one another and achieve synergy. If a knowledgeable character makes a new ability and you in the audience can reasonably predict how it will function, that is probably a synergistic system. Our 6th power system is meta, a diegetic structure of power that exists both inside and outside the canon of the narrative. Meta systems exist to serve narrative structure, genre commentary, or mechanics outside the world's internal logic. These systems know that they are systems and are relevant at least one level of abstraction above the story. Now, this is a little hard to understand without an example, so let's take a look at Undertale. In the game, actions taken by the player, saving, loading, resetting, they canonically affect what happens within the world. Characters remember previous timelines and player choices. Frisk's determination, while absolutely a thematic power system, is also a meta one. It's an in-universe explanation for events happening outside the universe, deaths being undone and timelines repeating. The characters with most determination control the story's direction and ultimately override causality. And this isn't a one-off, it's a legitimate system of power. Flowey uses it too. He knows he's in a loop and exploits the save mechanic to his advantage. In Doki Doki Literature Club, there are clearly 2 distinct levels of reality. The base canon existence, where anime girls go to high school and join a literature club and have teenage romances with the player character, and then there's the meta power system. Monica is aware that she exists within the confines of a visual novel. She knows she's in a video game on a computer and has meta abilities that can affect the base world, altering the backstories and personalities of the other girls to make them less desirable to the player, erasing everything in the world so it's just her left over, and even reading the files on your computer so that she knows your name in real life. The rules of her abilities explicitly transcend the reality in which she exists, structured around the mechanics of the medium, outside her world's internal logic. In a meta power system, one of the following is true. The audience is canonically relevant, narrative roles grant power, or rules of the genre override and retcon the established continuity. Now, to be clear, this doesn't automatically make every video game a meta power system. The fact that Link from Zelda can carry 35 swords or pause to eat 100 apples to instantly heal from the brink of death, these are mechanics of the game, but they're not referenced within the narrative. If Zelda saw and commented on the fact that you can heal a stab wound through the heart by eating some soup, then this would qualify as a meta power. Similarly, powers that appear to break the laws of reality but have an explanation in-universe are also not meta. Luffy's Gear 5 seems to break the world by acknowledging that he's a cartoon and turning the environment into rubber hose slapstick props, but all he's doing is giving the things he touches the same rubber-like quality that his body has. He's not actually using Toon Force or acting outside the bounds of reality. The rules aren't changing because the story, genre, or audience demands it. Finally, the 7th type of power system doesn't actually exist. There are only 6. I lied to you, and you fell for it. Stay frosty.